The air on Delta 7 tasted like metal and ash. It always did after a bombardment. Smoke blared from the skeletons of collapsed buildings, curling upward in laser spirals before the wind shredded them into the gray sky. Lieutenant Cade Var crouched in the shadow of a half-melted support beam, his pulse slow, controlled, but his eyes tracking every movement in the ruined plaza ahead. The weight of his rifle felt like an extension of his bones, but today he wasn't here for range work. He was here for one man, or rather, one thing. Galactic Sergeant Krell Thavos, 2.5 meters of muscle-wrapped in burnished armor, carrying a reputation that stank of massacres. Cade had seen his handiwork before. A month ago, on a mining colony at Vega Ridge, Krell's squad had cornered 30 unarmed colonists. The feed was public. Krell had started the broadcast by breaking a boy's neck on camera. He'd ended it with a laugh. The boy had been Cade's younger brother. That image was burned into Cade's skull. The smirk under the alien's ridged jawline, the wet snap of bone, the lifeless drop. The sound of it was the only thing Cade could hear in the sleepless hours between missions. Now, Krell was here, and so was Cade. The soldier moved into view through the haze, flanked by 2 lesser troops who swept the area with lazy confidence. The plaza was littered with broken storefronts and the blackened shells of speeders, perfect cover for an ambush, but Krell wasn't cautious. Why would he be? He believed himself untouchable. Cade rose from his crouch. Slowly. No rifle. No drawn blade. Just him. His boots crunched over scorched stone. The sound drew Krell's attention, and for the first time since Vega Ridge, their eyes locked. Krell's lip curled. Va! His voice was gravel-wrapped in disdain. You came all this way to die. Cade kept walking, closing the distance with deliberate steps. No. I came to kill you. The alien chuckled, a deep, rolling sound. His 2 escorts shifted, hands on their carbines, but Krell waved them off. No weapons? No armor? You're as stupid as a boy you cried over. Cade's teeth clenched. Say his name. Didn't bother to learn it. The plaza went silent, except for the distant groan of settling metal. Cade stopped 2 meters away. Krell loomed above him, his shadow falling like a wall. The alien moved first, fast for his size, his massive hand snapping forward like a piston. Bone and cartilage crunched under the blow. Cade's head snapped sideways, his vision going white-hot. Blood sprayed from his nose, splattering the stone. He staggered but didn't fall. Krell tilted his head, a predator savoring the moment. One strike. I told you, you're nothing. Cade wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand. His heartbeat slowed, the way it always did before the kill. 10 seconds, he said quietly. Krell frowned. What? That's how long you've got left. Cade moved. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Just the sudden, explosive violence of a man who had trained for this moment every waking hour since his brother's death. He ducked under Krell's neck swing, driving forward in a low rush that slammed his shoulder into the alien's midsection. The impact jarred Cade's bones but knocked Krell half a step off balance. Just enough. Cade's hand snapped to the hilt of the combat knife strapped inside his boot. 8 inches of blackened steel flashed upward, catching the light as it slid between 2 of Krell's armor plates, deep into the meat under his arm. Krell roared, his free hand clawing for Cade's throat. 7 seconds. Cade ripped the blade free, twisting away from the grasp. Blood, dark, almost black, sprayed across the cracked tiles. He moved in again, slamming the knife into the seam at Krell's neck. The alien's armor was advanced, but no alloy could stop steel driven with hatred and precision. 5 seconds. Krell bellowed, staggering, his massive frame swaying. His escorts had finally realized what was happening, but Cade's left hand was already on the grip of the sidam hidden at the small of his back. 3 shots, 2 in the first soldier's faceplate, 1 in the second's throat. They dropped like marionettes with cut strings. 3 seconds. Cade stepped back, the knife still in his hand, and looked Krell in the eyes. This is for Vega Ridge. He drove the blade upward, under the jaw, straight through the base of the skull. The point punched out between the alien's eyes. 0. Krell collapsed in a boneless heap, his skull ruined, his smirk erased forever. Cade stood over the body, chest rising and falling slowly. Around him, the plaza was silent again. The blood on his hands was warm. The air smelled of metal and ash. He looked down at Krell one last time, and for the first time since Vega Ridge, his hands stopped shaking. The rain began 10 minutes after Krell's body hit the plaza floor. Fat, oily drops fell from a bruised sky, cutting rivulets through the soot, and alien blood pooled around the corpse. Cade stood there longer than he should have, his boots in the spreading black, the knife still in his hand. His head throbbed from the broken nose, but the pain felt distant, dulled by the clean burn of victory. Then the sound came. Not boots, not engines, a low, resonant hum, like air vibrating in its own skin. Cade turned toward the plaza's northern edge, where the rain blurred the jagged outlines of the buildings. Through the haze, 3 tall figures emerged in perfect formation. Their armor was darker than Krell's, the plates edged in silver, their helms featureless save for a single vertical slit of white light where the eyes should be. They stopped 10 meters away, silent. Cade's finger twitched toward his sidearm. "Friends of his?" he asked, nodding toward Krell's body. The middle figure's voice was cold, modulated. "We are the Sentinels. He was our commander." Was... Cade's tone was flat. The Sentinel ignored the jab. "By killing Krell Thavos, you have invoked the right of ascension. His blood debt transfers to you." Cade gave a humorless half-smile. "I was hoping you'd say something like that." The Sentinel tilted his head slightly, studying him. "You misunderstand. The debt is not simply vengeance. His position, his power, his enemies, all are now yours. The Council will mark you as the inheritor. They will send challengers." The words hit harder than Cade expected. Challengers. Every warlord, assassin, and glory seeker within 10 sectors will come for your head, not out of loyalty to him, but to claim his place. This will not stop until you are dead. The Sentinel stepped forward and let something fall to the ground between them. A small, disc-shaped device, humming faintly. The rain hissed on its surface. "His beacon," the Sentinel said. "It has already transmitted your image across the outer rim. You have hours at most before the first arrives." Cade stared at the device. "Why warn me?" The voice was like a blade. "Because I intend to be the one who kills you." The Sentinels turned as one and walked back into the rain. Within moments, they were gone. Cade stood alone again, except he wasn't alone. From the shadows of the ruined buildings, faces began to emerge. Thin, ragged faces. Human faces. Survivors who had been hiding during the firefight. A boy no older than 16 stepped forward. His clothes were torn, his eyes sunken, but there was steel in his voice. "You killed him. We saw." Cade glanced at Krell's corpse. "Yeah." The boy's jaw tightened. "Then they'll come for you. They'll burn everything looking for you. And us." "I know." The boy's gaze was steady. "Then you'd better not die." Cade didn't answer. He toned, scanning the plaza for salvage. Krell's escorts carried standard-issue plasma rifles, too heavy and loud for what was coming. But Krell's own weapon lay near his hand, a massive glaive, its haft of dark metal etched with alien glyphs, its blade a curved, humming edge. Cade lifted it. The weapon was heavy, awkward in his grip, but something about it thrummed through his bones. Not just a weapon, a symbol. If the beacon was right, every bounty hunter in the sector would be coming for the man holding this glaive. By the time he left the plaza, the rain had nearly washed away the blood. Cade didn't make it 2 clicks before he heard the whine of an engine. He ducked into the skeletal frame of a collapsed hab block, pressing himself against the wall. The sound grew louder, then cut sharply, followed by the hiss of landing thrusters. A voice echoed through the rain. "Cade Va, step out, and I might let you keep your arms." Cade leaned to the edge of the wall and looked. A lone figure stood in the open, rain streaming down his long coat. Human, or close enough, with a gaunt face and eyes like shards of ice. At his hip, a long-barreled pistol rested in an easy grip. "Bounty hunter," Cade muttered. The man smiled without warmth. "One of the first to answer the call. Thought I'd get here before the crowd." Cade stepped out from cover, the glaive in his hand. "You think that's yours?" "I think you're tired, wounded, and still bleeding from the nose. That makes you slow." "Try me." The hunter didn't hesitate. His pistol came up, and the plaza exploded with sound. Plasma bolts hissed past Cade's head, punching molten craters into the wall behind him. Cade darted forward, keeping low, closing the gap before the hunter could adjust. The glaive's blade hummed as it cut the air, and then it cut through the pistol like paper. Sparks flared, the weapon clattering to the ground in two smoking halves. The hunter staggered back, drawing a knife, but Cade was already moving. The glaive punched through his chest, the energy blade searing the wound shut as it passed through. The man's face froze in shock, then slackened as he fell. Cade pulled the weapon free and let the rain wash it clean. He didn't look back. By the time night fell, the beacon's prophecy had begun to take shape. Cade holed up in the ruins of an old transit station, high in the shattered spine of the city. From there, he could see the landing lights of new ships coming down through the clouds. Too many, too fast. They weren't coming for the city. They were coming for him. He set the glaive against the wall and leaned his head back, letting the pain from his broken nose anchor him. Krell was dead, but that death had been the spark for something far worse. The Council wanted blood. The warlords wanted status. The hunters wanted payment. They'd all get the same thing from him. A shallow sound caught his attention, the scrape of boot on stone. Cade was on his feet instantly, the glaive in hand. A figure stepped into the dim light, not alien, not armored, but a human woman in her late 20s, her dark hair tied back, her eyes sharp. She carried no weapon, but her stance was balanced, coiled. "Cade Va," she said. "Who's asking?" "Someone who doesn't want you dead. Yet." He didn't lower the glaive. "That's rare tonight. I work for people who think you might survive this mess. People who hate the Council as much as you do." She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the weapon. "But if you want to make it through the next week, you're going to need more than a blade and a bad attitude." Cade narrowed his eyes. "And you're offering what?" "An alliance. A way to turn this beacon from a death sentence into a weapon. Let the hunters come. But instead of running, we make this city your killing ground." Cade looked past her, toward the faint glow of more landing craft breaking the clouds. He didn't trust her, but the truth was, he didn't have much choice. "All right," he said finally. "Tell me your plan." She smiled, and in that smile was a promise that things were about to get much, much bloodier. The woman's name was Lyra Cade. Not a soldier, at least not anymore. The way she moved told Cade she'd been trained, though, and not by any backwater militia. Her steps were light, her eyes always measuring the space between them, the angles of entry and escape. She spread a crumpled city schematic across a slab of cracked ferrocrete in the transit station's control room. The rain outside was a constant drumbeat against the shattered windows. "They'll land here, and here." Lyra pointed to 3 locations on the map with a gloved finger. Each site gives them a direct path to the upper district. That means they'll cut through the markets, the refinery stacks, and this transit hub. Cade leaned over the map, studying it. "You want them to come here. I want them to think they're herding you into the open. We'll seed explosives along the approaches. Shape the fight. No matter how many ships land, they'll bottleneck here." Cade's grip tightened on Krell's glaive. "Won't work on all of them. Some won't bother with a chase. They'll burn the place from above." Lyra's eyes flicked to his. "That's why you need to make this personal. Show them you're not prey. You're bait." She slid a small device across the table, a transmitter, all but functional. "Your beacon's already broadcasting. Let's add to the story. Make it loud. Make it so every killer in orbit has to come down here to collect your skull in person." Cade gave a sharp, humorless grin. "You're enjoying this." "I enjoy watching the Council's dogs choke on their own teeth." By dawn, the bait was set. Lyra had vanished into the streets to plant charges, her movements covered by the early morning fog rolling through the ruins. Cade stayed in the upper district, deliberately letting himself be seen. Hunters in the sector thrived on rumors, and he wanted to see plenty of them. He walked through the blackened market square, past stalls draped in tattered canvas, past scavengers who shrank back at the sight of the glaive. The beacon on his hip pulsed steadily, broadcasting his position to anyone listening. By mid-morning, the city had new sounds, engines cutting low, the thump of boots hitting rooftops, the hiss of weapons powering up. They were here. The first wave came fast and ugly. 3 mercenaries in mismatched armor, moving with the jittery speed of stimulant boosts. Their helmets were painted with crude kill marks, and each carried a blade that shimmered faintly with energy. Cade didn't run. He stood in the center of the square, glaive held low, waiting until they broke formation to flank him. The first lunging with a sweeping strike, too high, too eager. Cade stepped under it, the glaive's humming edge cleaving through the man's thigh. The second came from the side, stabbing for Cade's ribs, but a quick pivot let him hook the glaives half behind the merc's ankle and rip it out from under him. The third closed in from behind, but a sudden explosion ripped through the alley, hurling him against a wall in a spray of shrapnel. Lyra emerged from the smoke, a compact pistol in one hand. 2 down, she called. 3, Cade corrected, driving the glaive through the downed mercenary before turning to meet the next. It was over in less than a minute. The square stank of burned flesh and melted armor. But the real trouble came an hour later. Lyra was reloading in the shadow of a collapsed tower when Cade heard the sound, not the hiss of plasma, but the sharp, rhythmic click of metal boots on stone. Precise, unhurried. From the far end of the street, a figure stepped into view. Unlike the others, he wore no helmet. His face was pale, scarred down one cheek, his dark hair cropped short. His eyes, though, those froze Cade mid-step, because he knew them. Darren, Cade said slowly. The man's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. It's been a while, brother. Lyra looked between them sharply. Brother? Cade didn't answer. His heartbeat was suddenly a hard, steady drum in his ears. I thought you were dead. I was, until the council decided I wasn't. Darren stepped closer, the long, curved blade at his hip catching the morning light. They gave me a choice. Die in the pits, I'll serve as their executioner. Cade's grip on the glaive tightened. So you came here to kill me. Darren's voice was quiet, almost regretful. It's the only way I keep breathing. Lyra shifted her stance, eyes narrowing. You don't have to do this. Darren's gaze flicked to her, then back to Cade. Yes, I do. The fight started without warning. Darren moved with lethal precision, closing the gap in 3 strides. His blade flashed for Cade's throat. Cade met it with a glaive's haft, the clash ringing out like a struck bell. They broke apart instantly, circling. Cade knew Darren's style. Fast, economical, always testing for weakness. But this was sharper, more refined, like someone had taken that style and honed it into a killing instrument. Darren came in low this time, feinting left before spinning into a rising slash. Cade barely got the glaive across in time, the force of the blow rattling his bones. Lyra darted in, trying to flank Darren, but he moved like water, sidestepping his strike and slamming an elbow into her ribs. She staggered back, gasping. You brought help, Darren said, his tone neutral. Good. Makes this more interesting. Cade lunged, aiming for his brother's legs, but Darren vaulted over the sweep, landing lightly behind him. Cade spun, swinging the glaive in a tight arc, forcing Darren back. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The only sounds were their breathing, the hiss of the glaive, and the scrape of boots on wet stone. Then Darren's blade slipped past Cade's guard, nicking his side. Pain flared, hot and immediate. You've slowed, Darren said quietly. You've sold yourself. Cade shot back. Lyra recovered enough to rejoin the fight, peppering Darren with short, sharp pistol bursts. He deflected 2, slipped past a third, and closed on her, but Cade was already there, driving the glaive but into Darren's ribs. The blow forced him to stumble, just long enough for Lyra to plant a boot in his chest and shove him back. Darren skidded to a stop, eyes flicking between them. A muscle in his jaw tightened. This isn't over, he said. Then, before either could move, he triggered something on his wrist. A blinding flash filled the street, white-hot and disorienting. By the time Cade's vision cleared, Darren was gone. Lyra swore under her breath. Family reunions going well. Cade said nothing. His side burned where Darren's blade had cut him, but the wound was shallow. Still, the truth gnawed at him. Darren was alive. And now he was hunting Cade, not as a stranger, but as blood. Lyra read his silence. Is coming back. You know that. Cade nodded slowly. Yeah, and next time, I'm ready. He picked up the glaive, its unsteady and low, and looked out at the smoldering city. More ships were landing. More killers were coming. But now the fight wasn't just about Krell, or the Council, or survival. It was about the brother who'd chosen the other side, and the reckoning waiting between them. By the second night, Delta 7 was no longer a city. It was a hunting ground. The smoke never cleared now. It clung to the streets like a living thing. Fires burned in the old refinery stacks, throwing red light against the broken skyline. Somewhere beyond the industrial sector, something exploded hard enough to rattle the ferrocrete under Cade's boots. Lyra stood beside him on the upper balcony of an abandoned hotel, binoculars pressed to her eyes. 2 more dropships in the south quadrant. Light armor. Infantry teams only. Too many for us to tangle with head-on, Cade said, which is why we're not doing that. She lowered the binoculars, her face lit orange by the distant flames. The charges are set along the bridge. If they chase us across, the whole span drops into the river gorge. Anything with a pulse down, they won't be coming back up. Cade looked down at the glaive in his hands. The weapon was becoming more than just Krell's trophy. It had become his signal. Every hunter in the sector recognized it now, and every one of them wanted to see it on someone else's belt. Good. The first push came at dawn. Cade and Lyra made sure they were visible, moving fast through the shattered market district with just enough noise to be heard. Their pursuers didn't bother with subtlety. 8 armored mercenaries swept in from the south, weapons blazing. Plasma bolts tore through stalls and walls, melting stone and wood. Cade moved like he had on every kill mission before. Fast, precise, never in one place long enough to be cornered. Lyra laid down covering fire with her pistol, her shots deliberate, never wasting a round. They broke for the bridge exactly on cue. The mercenaries followed, their heavy boots clanging against the old metal span. The river roared far below, white water surging between jagged rocks. Halfway across, Cade triggered the detonator. The blast was deafening. Fire ripped through the bridge supports, shearing the structure in half. Mercenaries screamed as the deck split under them, plunging them into the churning water. Cade didn't stop moving. He vaulted the last intact section and rolled into cover on the far bank. Lyra landed beside him, breathing hard. "That's 8 less to worry about," she said. "For now," Cade answered. They didn't have long to breathe. By midday, more ships were coming down, their hulls marked with sigils Cade didn't recognize. This wave was different, more disciplined. The hunters moved in coordinated teams, flushing them from cover to cover, forcing them toward the industrial sector. Cade could feel it, the tightening noose. Someone up there in orbit was guiding them. They fell back through the refinery stacks, the air thick with chemical stink. Lyra triggered another set of charges, collapsing part of the catwalk network, buying them a few more minutes. But minutes were all they got. The next team found them in the upper levels, cutting them off from the eastern exit. Cade recognized the lead hunter instantly, a massive 4-armed alien with skin like dull bronze and a pair of spinning chain blades. His kind were bred for close-quarter slaughter, and the way he grinned told Cade exactly how much he enjoyed it. The alien charged, chain blades roaring. Cade sidestepped the first swipe, feeling the wind of the strike against his face, and drove the glaive's humming edge through the outer muscle of one arm. It barely slowed him down. The second arm caught Cade across the chest, the impact slamming him against a rusted pipe. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he rolled away before the chain blades came down again. Lyra's pistol barked 3 times, each round punching into the alien's torso, but he kept coming. Cade knew he had to end it now. He ducked under the next swing and drove the glaive upward through the alien's jaw, the point punching clean out the top of his skull. The giant stiffened, then dropped like a falling pillar. Cade pulled the weapon free, chest heaving. "That's one I don't want to see again." Lyra smirked, pretty sure he won't be walking it off. By the time night fell, the industrial sector was a graveyard. Bodies, human and otherwise, lay in pools of black and red, lit by the flickering flames of burning fuel tanks. Cade and Lyra retreated to a rooftop overlooking the main avenue. From here, they could see the next wave forming, a dozen hunters, moving with purpose. Among them was a familiar figure. Darren. He wasn't leading them, but he wasn't just another blade in the crowd, either. The way they gave him space told Cade all he needed to know. Darren was dangerous even to the other hunters. Lyra followed his gaze. "Your brother." Cade's jaw tightened. "Yeah." "You think he's here for the same reason as the others?" "No," Cade said. "He's here for me." They set the trap in the old maglev depot. The high, echoing space was crisscrossed with rusted rail lines and suspended cargo platforms. Lyra rigged explosives under the main platform supports, while Cade spread the beacon's signal across multiple transmitters, making it impossible to pinpoint his exact location. The hunters came in from 3 directions. The first of 4 was a sniper. Lyra spotted a glint of his scope in the rafters and dropped him with a single clean shot. The second was a heavily armored brute who charged down the center line, only to have the floor collapse under him when Cade triggered the charges. The depot filled with chaos, shouts in half a dozen languages, weapons fire sparking off steel beams, the constant hum of the glaive cutting through anything in reach. And then Darren was there. He moved through the fight like it was a dance he'd been practicing all his life, his curved blade painting arcs of silver in the air. Cade cut down a mercenary at his flank and turned to face him. "Thought you'd wait until I was tired," Cade said. "You are tired," Darren replied, stepping in close. Their weapons met in a sharp, ringing clash. For a few seconds, the rest of the battle faded. There was only Darren's eyes, his stance, the way every strike flowed into the next. "You don't have to do this," Cade said between blows. "You don't know what they'll do to me if I don't," Darren shot back. "This is the only way I keep breathing." "Then maybe you should stop." Darren's expression didn't change, but his next strike came harder, faster. Cade barely blocked it, feeling the force travel all the way up his arms. Around them, the fight thinned. Lyra had dropped 3 more hunters, but she was pinned behind a stack of cargo crate by plasma fire. Cade and Darren's blades locked, inches from each other's faces. "This ends tonight," Darren said. "Agreed." Cade twisted the glaive, breaking the lock, and drove a knee into Darren's ribs. Darren staggered back, just as a deafening blast ripped through the depot. One of Lyra's charges had gone off early. The central support beams collapsed, the entire platform shuddering under their feet. Darren looked at the falling debris, then back at Cade. "Not here," he said, and dove backward into the chaos, disappearing into the smoke. When the dust settled, half the hunters were dead. The rest had scattered. Lyra limped over, her face streaked with grime. "You didn't kill him." Cade stared at the smoke where Darren had vanished. "No, but next time I won't give him the choice." More dropships were landing beyond the horizon. The fight wasn't over. It wasn't even close. But Cade knew now that the hunters were only half the war. The other half was blood. The snow was falling sideways now, whipped by wind that carried the taste of iron and smoke. The ridgeline where it had all begun was gone, blown apart, chewed to gravel by the firestorm of orbital strikes and gunships that had torn across the valley for 2 straight hours. The world felt stripped bare. Yerrick stood alone at the heart of the ruin, the wind clawing at the torn edges of his uniform. His breathing was ragged, his jaw still smeared with the blood of the soldier who'd started all this. Around him, the snow was stained with black pools and shards of alien armor. He could hear them. The last wave, the rhythmic crunch of boots through snow carried on the wind, syncopated with the metallic rattle of weapons. The survivors of the Zealeth Ninth Legion, battle-hard, merciless, and burning for revenge, were coming for him. Yerrick shifted his weight, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle in his hands. His helmet was gone, one eye swelling shut from a blow early in the fight. But his stance was steady. His finger was loose on the trigger. "This ends today." The first shape emerged from the haze, tall, armored, weapon-braced. A targeting beam cut through the snow and painted a red point on Yerrick's chest. He didn't flinch. He raised his rifle and fired once. The beam vanished along with half the soldier's head, the body toppling like a dropped marionette. Then the rest came. They fanned out, pouring fire into the shattered ground where he'd been standing an instant before. Yerrick dove sideways into the wreckage of a half-buried transport, shards of ice exploding around him. He rolled, came up on one knee, and picked another target out of the blur. 3 quick shots, 3 bodies dropping before the others even noticed. The fight wasn't clean anymore. It wasn't the crisp, surgical combat of an ambush. It was chaos. Plasma bolts chewed through steel plates inches from his head. A grenade landed close enough to rattle his teeth, flinging him backward into the snow. He spat blood, scrambled to his feet, and fired blind into the drifting shapes until he heard a scream. They were getting closer. Too close. Yerrick slung the rifle and drew his sidearm, ducking low as a shadow leapt from his left. A Zalith warrior, twice his mass, slammed into him, driving him into the snow. Yerrick's ribs screamed as claws raked across his armor. He jammed the pistol under the alien's chin and pulled the trigger until there was nothing left but twitching weight. 7 down. 6 left. They kept coming. They wanted his death so badly they'd wade through the corpses of their own. Yerrick backed toward the ridge's edge, pistol in one hand, knife in the other. The wind here was stronger, threatening to pull him off the cliff. A plasma bolt grazed his arm, burning through flesh. He bit down on the pain, shot the one who'd fired it, and spun toward the next. Then he saw him. The officer, the one who had ordered his execution after the lesson at the start of all this. The one who had smiled when the first soldier broke Yerrick's nose. The officer stepped forward through the snow, his armor gleaming in the dull light, holding a long-bladed energy staff. "Human," the officer said in the Zalith tongue, voice amplified by his suit. "You've killed enough of my soldiers. Die knowing you fought well." Yerrick spat into the snow, never breaking eye contact. "You're going to regret not finishing me when you had the chance." The officer lunged. The staff whistled through the air, heat shimmering along its edge. Yerrick twisted aside, the blade passing inches from his face, and fired his last 2 pistol rounds point-blank. The officer's armor flared, absorbing the shots. Yerrick dropped the pistol and closed in, knife flashing in his grip. The officer swung again, forcing Yerrick back, each blow strong enough to split stone. Yerrick ducked one, turned the momentum, and slammed his knife into the alien's thigh. The officer roared, backhanding Yerrick so hard he tasted copper. His knife was still stuck in the wound. He needed a new angle. The snow swirled between them. Both men circled, each breathing hard. The officer came in again. This time Yerrick stepped into the attack. His hand caught the staff shaft, wrenching it aside as his other fist slammed into the alien's throat. The officer staggered, and Yerrick ripped the knife free from his leg, driving it upward into the seam between helmet and armor. Hot black blood spilled across the snow. The officer collapsed to his knees, eyes wide, before falling forward into the drift. Silence. The wind screamed over the cliff edge, but no more boots crunched in the snow. The rest had fled, or died without him even knowing. Yerrick stood there, chest heaving, surrounded by bodies. The valley was littered with the dead, the snow drinking their heat. He closed his eyes for just a moment, long enough to hear the comm channel crackle in his ear. "Yerrick, this is command. Evac inbound. You still breathing?" He looked around at the destruction, the way the snow was already beginning to cover the blood. "Yeah," he said. "Still hay." The dropship arrived minutes later, cutting through the haze with its thrusters. As it landed, the crew looked out at him with wide eyes, taking in the field of bodies and the ruin he'd made. One of them finally asked, "What happened here?" Yerrick climbed aboard, dropping into the seat, his voice flat. He thought a broken nose would end it. He looked back once, at the officer's still body lying in the snow. 10 seconds later, he was missing his skull. The hatch sealed, and the ship lifted off, leaving the battlefield behind.